To today's tutorial. So for today I will be taking you through application testing, specifically testing for forms. And the first thing that we're going to do is to create and upload a blank project. So we're going to do that by opening a terminal. And because I want my folder to be in desktop, I will cd to desktop. Then following the documentation, I will paste these commands to create this folder. So what we're going to be calling this project is CHT App Tutorials. So what this does is that it will give you an empty skeleton of what a basic project should look like. So if we were to go to desktop now, we can see CHT App Tutorials. And it has different folders. So this is just a skeleton of what a project folder should look like. But these folders are empty, so it depends on what you would like to put in your folders. So we're going to be testing if we have installed CHT. So we have installed it. So in case you're not able to see that you have installed CHT, you will just follow the documentation on how to install CHT-conf. The next thing we're going to be installing is Chai and Mocha, which are Java packages that we need. So once we have installed Chai and Mocha, we are going to look through our package.json file. So we're going to be ensuring that the scripts we have there are the correct scripts and that everything that we need that we have from the package.json file is what we require. The thing that we're going to be confirming is that we have those dependencies that we have installed are there in our package.json file, and that the script that we have here is the same one on the package.json file. So the package.json file just describes your project, the name, the dependencies that you will require to run your tests, and scripts are like aliases that you use to run your tests. So instead of writing a long command, you have an alias for that command. Like instead of writing npm run the whole long command, you alias it as test. So that's just what the script means. So we'll go ahead and check what our package.json file has. In case you don't have one, you can create it and then you can input anything that you need. So you can see we have named our project as CHT App Tutorials. We've given it a version. Versioning just makes it easier in case you're running different, the same project but in different versions. And then we have our aliases here. Feel free to name your aliases in whatever way you would like. And then we have the dependencies that we had installed here. So having done that, we can go ahead and that once we have confirmed that whatever we need in the package.json file, we can go ahead and ensure that now we have forms and the .spec.js files that we require. So as you can see, we have already looked into our package.json file, but in our forms we have nothing. So you can go to the build forms tutorial just to see how you can create your forms. Another important thing to note is that you are the configurable way to do it is to put all your tests under this test folder. It makes your project neat and you're able to analyze and see what is going wrong. So for inside the test folder, we have different folders. So we put the contact summary tests inside this folder, the forms test inside this folder, the targets test inside this folder, and the tasks tests inside this folder. So you're going to learn about the different ways to test various components of your applications. For now, we're just going to do forms. To create a simple form that we will go through in this tutorial. So this form is very simple. So it contains just one group and it just has a couple of questions. So as you can see, a form, if you have gone through the tutorial for building app forms, then maybe you know what survey is and what traces are and what settings are. So I would recommend you go through that first. So after that, you would be able to understand what begin group and end group would be. So for my form, we just have a couple of questions here. So the first question will be, how old is the child? What kind of feeding does the child receive? Is this child in good health? Would you recommend? And please provide. So some of them are questions that come up as follow-up, so they are not always there, and we can see that through the form. Us to be able to update our local instance, we will run this command. So you would change this to your password and your username. So I'll just input my password and then my username. So once you have completed your forms, what you will do is convert them to .xml and upload them to your local instance. So once you've done that, if I go back to my local instance and sync for a specific person, like this person that I have chosen here, I can see the file. So you can see that the file, so if we were to look at the file, we could see that it's named Child's Feeding and Health. So for this set of questions, that's what it's called, but this file is called Child. So as we had seen here, this form is called Child Age and Health. So it just has a few questions. So the easiest, or one of the ways to test your application is to go into your local instance and input different inputs so that you're able to see what the outputs would be. Now, it's very important for you to test in whatever way that you would like to test, because testing enables you to see whether your application is actually working in the correct way or as you expect. Testing using the test harness is also equally important, because as you continue to build on your application, as you continue to add more forms and more questions into your forms, sometimes some parts break other parts. So as you're adding things, it might break in other areas. So unit tests only test a single part of your implementation. For example, for these files or for these forms, we're just testing if the inputs are giving the actual outputs that we require. So for example, for this case, we would input different inputs. For example, how old is the child? You'd input 0 to 3 months. Is the child, what kind of feeding does this child receive? We will say he or she is being breastfed exclusively. And is the child in good health? We would say yes. So as we could see from our form, if we were to put that the feeding method is replacement feeding, we would get an extra question of, would you recommend a follow-up nutrition session? And if we were to say that the child's health is not good, we would be asked to provide further information. So if you were to go back to your application and you test these things, you see that if I have chosen replacement feeding, I'm getting an extra question. And if I say that the child's health is not good, I would get an extra question. So this just makes it easier for you to test. So it's an easier way to test. So you're able to submit these inputs that you have input. So you get a report. Now, what a test harness does. So I have been able to create that a simple form. So you could see after I converted the form, now we have a .xml file. So if I go to the test folder, I would put my .spec.js file under the forms folder, under the test folder. For example, here we have a describe that we are calling getting started tests. And this just contains a group of tests that we want to have here. So if we had various scenarios, and scenarios are defined by it, so we would put them under this describe first group of tests, which we are naming getting started tests. So it's good to name your tests in a way that is descriptive, so that you're able to know, even as you're watching, as you're testing them, as you're running the test harness, you're able to watch and see what groups of tests are running. So here in our first scenario of integration test confirming follow-up questions appear for replacement feeding, we have here that we want to fill the form with this specific form. So we are telling this harness we are filling this specific form, which is the form we've created, and that we are filling it with this input. So that the first input would be 3 to 6 months, the second one replacement feeding. So unlike when you're going into input, the way we have input on the local instance manually, here you would define what inputs you want. So in that case, you would come back here to the terminal and run from our package.json file. So we can open that up just to see what we also had, or what alias we had given. So from our package.json file, we want to run this unit test, which under the folder test, any file that's in any folder within it that has .spec.js. So we would run npm run unit test. So depending on what you've named as your alias under the script. So this has gone by quickly because we only have one .spec.js file. If we had more, it would have run for more. So it's telling you that we are filling the first page with these inputs that we had provided. And then once it runs, it would tell you that one has passed. This one scenario that you are testing has passed. Now, what if we went ahead in our .spec.js file, we changed a couple of things. For example, if we were to change it to mixed feeding. So if we did that and left everything as it is and ran unit tests again, it has failed, and it says it has done this because it was expecting that the third input here would be empty, but it can see that there is something. So it attempted, so there's even a message here. So it attempted to fill 5 questions, but only 4 are visible. Okay. That means that for each of these questions, so if we were to go back here, so for each of these questions, if we say, for example, we filled that, and then it has filled as mixed feeding, the .spec.js file was given 3 more inputs, yet in this form, we only have 1 more question, unless we put no for this question. Okay. So it means if we were to go ahead and change this next question to be no, then it would only expect one more answer, or one more input. So if we were to save this and run this, it would pass. But let's say if we were to leave out this input, it would still pass because, as you can see from the form, this final question is not required. You have an option to fill it, but it's not required to fill. All right, and if we were to change this to yes, and we had another input like extra information, and we run this again, it would fail because it's expecting to fill 3. It's expecting there are 4 questions, but it only has there are 4 inputs, but it only has 3 questions that it can see. Your .spec.js file in whatever way you want, depending on the inputs and the questions that you have. So it just helps you to see whether any of your inputs or any of your questions is breaking the inputs or the outputs that you have from the other questions. In case anything is not clear, especially in terms of the hooks and all other things that are included in the .spec.js file, you can go through the documentation site to get more information.